Hey everybody. Um, my name is Doug Guthrie. I'm a solutions engineer here at Braintrust. You all here are at a webinar for evaluating agents. So really learning about best practices, learning about Loop and the origin stories of that. Um, I have sort of a brief presentation, walk through some slides to kind of present all of those different things. And then I actually want to jump into the Braintrust platform to give you a sense for all the different things that you can do with Loop. So obviously, Braintrust is an end-to-end developer platform for building AI products. And obviously, you are here today to watch the webinar about evaluating agents. This is our very, very unofficial Loop mascot that I created via ChatGPT. So this is probably the first and only time that you'll see this. As I mentioned, I'm a solutions engineer here at Braintrust. Prior to this, I was at a company called DBT Labs, helping companies sort of build out their data infrastructure. One of the things that I saw very frequently with those customers is that they would get these like sort of prototypes into production, like these chatbots or different things. And they didn't have a really great way of getting from that prototype into like something in a production setting that was reliable, accurate, all of those different things. And they were actually missing a tool like Braintrust and evaluation infrastructure that allowed them to build something in a reliable way and iterate on that particular thing and ensure it was doing the thing that it was supposed to be doing. So this is really the reason why I joined Braintrust, and now I get to kind of talk to a lot of different customers about the different things that they are doing and help them build the best possible thing for their companies. Um, Kind of mentioned a few of these things, but as like a more detailed agenda for the presentation, I wanted to talk a little bit about like the evaluation challenge for agents themselves, like why it's hard, and then what success looks like, what we have seen internally from our own customers deploying agents into production. Then, of course, Loop, right, our new feature that you can think of as an AI assistant for evals. Then I actually want to give you sort of like the Loop origin story, where it came from, and then how that relates to just evaluation fundamentals. It'll kind of set us up for best practices as well as the actual demo a little bit later on. And then we'll actually dive into some of the best practices that we've seen. A lot of these are really, some of these just really come from us internally building things. But primarily it comes from us interacting with our customers, right? We have a lot of really great customers that are putting agents out into production that are doing real things for their customers. And those sorts of learnings that they are getting within their own setting actually comes back into our own product. And so a lot of that feedback loop that I'll talk about in a slightly different way is actually helping us build a better brain trust for the customers that are using us. Then, of course, we'll actually walk through the demo of Loop. So I want to give you a sense for all the different things that it can do. We'll wrap it up with just some key takeaways, and then at the end, we'll do a live Q&A. So feel free to put some questions into the chat. Ornella is here as well, and she can answer some of the things. And if she can't answer them, we'll answer them at the end. But please feel free to throw some things into the chat. Okay, cool. So I mentioned we want to talk a little bit about the challenge of evaluating agents. What I want to talk a little bit about is like this agent paradox. And I'll tell you a little bit what I think that is, why agent evaluation is hard, some of the different roadblocks that you might run into, and then what success looks like using a framework or infrastructure like Braintrust. So this is actually a quote that I heard from Ankur pretty recently, and it's somewhat tongue in cheek, but I think it describes I think one of the problems that I've seen with some of the customers that have come to us trying to evaluate agents. And it's every agent you admire is a system prompt, a for loop, and three to ten tools, right? It's somewhat tongue in cheek. There are a lot. There's certainly going to be additional complexity in certain cases, but I think boiling it down to those specific or those things allows you to evaluate your agent in a much simpler way. Starting from like a simple way of doing this makes this problem a lot easier to solve for. So maybe building from that, why just evaluating agents are hard in general, I think maybe just to start with is the multi-step complexity. You have these tasks broken down into steps, right? Maybe you're chaining prompts together. Maybe your agent has access to tools. Maybe there's a router involved. Like all of these different types of things that we can use, and you've seen lots of different agent architectures. But as you have those different complexities within that system, and an error happens right at the outset, that error starts to cascade down, right? And it becomes really, really hard to build a reliable and accurate agent. So the multi-step complexity itself, and this is where like why I think about this and why I started with this is like if we can boil this down to something that's simple, maybe we can make this evaluation part and just building the agent a little bit easier. The non-deterministic, this is, I think, just in general building with LLMs, but it kind of builds on top of that multi-step complexity and that first bullet point. But you have, the same input and then getting different outputs, and then how the agent is going to respond to those different outputs. That's like really the challenge of what we're trying to build for. And just tool dependencies. Obviously, like when you have those multi-steps, obviously some of those steps are going to be tool calls, external APIs. Maybe you're calling out to your own internal database. These just create additional failure points that we have to solve for within the agent code. Then the other thing I think is more about the like the evaluation in general is one of the things that I've heard from customers when they come to us and they have sort of like this agent that they're trying to evaluate. There's almost this sort of like paralysis of like, do I do the final output or do I need to evaluate the individual steps? When I have these individual steps, how do I think about evaluating them? And I have sort of a best practice along these lines. But I think just talking a little bit about evaluation scope at the very beginning becomes really beneficial as we start building out our agent. Let's talk a little bit about the sort of what I call the three North Stars to eval excellence. Again, something that I ripped off from Anker very recently. You'll find that a lot throughout this presentation. Um, I think part of this comes with having really, really great eval infrastructure, which is what Braintrust is. It allows you to iterate very quickly. So what you'll see in a little bit, a couple slides down, is how Loop got created. But the way that it got created was really adhering to these North Stars. So having the infrastructure allows you to iterate on evals as new models are released, right? So if a new model is released, you should be able to deploy that new eval or deploy that new model if it impacts your application in a positive way within hours, not days, right? And eval infrastructure allows for that. You should be able to capture feedback and then add that back to your offline evals, add that back to your data sets, edge cases that you're not capturing in a very, very simple way, less than or equal to 2 clicks. And then the last one is you should have ambitious evals. And what I mean by that is you should have functionality that you believe it fundamentally changes or alters your product in an incredibly positive way. And if you have the infrastructure in place, running these evals as those models get better and better, and you can see like it seems like we have a new model every week, every month, whatever it is. As we do that, and we already have these ambitious evals created for this product that unlocks this experience for our users, now it becomes incredibly easy to go and deploy this into a production setting and really add value to our customers. So that brings me to Loop and the origin story. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about what Loop is, and then the anatomy of an eval. Actually, that'll be slightly mixed up. But if you think about to that last slide of like the North Stars to eval excellence, Loop was actually born from an ambitious eval. This wasn't something that was just created in the last month or so. This was created months ago. We had built out the eval, being able to understand this type of functionality, whether or not it could be something that we could put into our product because of the nature of the models when we initially built out this eval, it wasn't necessarily at a point where we could actually deploy it into production. It wasn't reliable enough. It wasn't accurate enough. And so we sort of kept it on the shelf, right? Now, as we have net new models being introduced, and specifically Claude 4, once that model was introduced, we were able to now test that eval against that net new model. And we saw a 6x improvement in our scoring of that eval, which actually gave us the confidence now to go and deploy that thing into production, which now we have already kind of built out the sort of infrastructure around this feature. It became very, very easy to go ship it in 2 weeks here, just really creating the UI around it within the application. Before kind of telling you what Loop is, I think just to kind of level set on what an eval is in general, because it'll lead up into what Loop is going to do for you as an AI assistant for evals. And so At Braintrust, what we think of an eval, there's really three different components that make up this thing here, right? So it's the task. This could be something as incredibly simple as a prompt, right? It could be like you have a prompt, we're going to get some output, or it could be the most complex agentic system that we had talked about in a previous slide. But fundamentally, the task has an input and then it produces an output. On top of that, then we have a data set. Think of this as our series of test cases. This is our golden data set of real world examples. This is also the thing that we can also add edge cases to as we start understanding how this thing works in a production setting. The last component are what we call scores. This is really like the logic behind your evals. This is what's going to give you an understanding, a sense for how well this thing is actually going to perform in a production setting. But it's really, again, I can't stress this enough. It's the logic behind your evals. It's going to like, you could think, we want to actually codify how we imagine success to look like for this particular task. And so we can codify that either as an LLM as a judge score or in a code-based, more like heuristic-based score. But these are the things that actually tell us how well our application or task is performing. And so building on that, when you think of Loop, the feature that we just built, what this thing is able to do now, and obviously you'll see this in a little bit, but it's able to generate prompts. It's able to optimize the prompt relative to the scores that it's seen within our playground. It's able to build data sets, right? So understanding maybe the existing data set you have and prompting it with, hey, what are the edge cases that I'm not considering here within this data set? It's able to run evals. So imagine like you optimize that prompt or you add new data set rows. Within the playground itself, it's able to now run that eval to understand whether or not you were able to improve those scores. And right now, it's able to edit existing scores and then create code-based scores as well. But the fundamental sort of aspects of the eval, the task, the data set, and the score, Loop now has access to creating, modifying, optimizing all of these different things. And so you imagine as a developer doing an eval sort of, locally or obviously within our playground, you have to go through and do sort of all of these steps in a manual sense, where when you're using Loop, it's an augmented way to actually do that same workflow. So you as a developer, you as a user of Braintrust are just going to be much more efficient in creating those evals. Best practices, really quick. We have scores as PRDs. Again, another thing that I ripped from Anker, and I'll show you or I'll describe a little bit of what I mean by that. And then being able to start simple. Talked a little bit about this in a previous slide, but really being able to start from a simple place from an evaluation perspective, and then building on top of that once we find the failure points within our agent. And then the last one, and this speaks to a phrase I've been using a couple times, is eval infrastructure. This feedback loop that we can create from an offline sense into actually logging the things that are happening in production, using those logs to find edge cases, and then very easily adding those back to our offline evals to augment that workflow. But the eval infrastructure is the thing that's going to create the feedback loop that you really do need to create a really good AI product. So the thing that again I ripped from Anker, scoring functions are like quantifiable PRDs for AI products. So I mentioned in the previous slide that we can sort of codify the logic of our eval in those scoring functions. So think of this as like a really great place to start. You're building a product, not necessarily an AI product. You generally, like as a product manager, are going to start from a PRD kind of perspective. What are the requirements for this? What should be the output? All of these different things that are in a PRD, we can now sort of encode within an LLM as a judge score or within a code-based score. And you can make it so easy for an LLM to go and actually assess that task. But now you have a place to actually, you have a baseline to build from, right? So like as you go and do that iteration, you have an understanding of what are the things that are actually going to make this better or worse. So this is the defining success before you build. So kind of building on that, scoring functions are quantifiable PRDs. Defining success at the outset allows you to articulate requirements with precision, right? You can encode that logic again in those scoring functions, and it makes it incredibly easy for that LLM to go and actually assess for, accuracy or whatever it is you're trying to assess for, or like an even dumber sort of Python or TypeScript code allows you to assess for success or failure. It also forces you to be very clear upfront on the things that you're trying to solve for that particular agent. I think maybe going back to like some of the customer conversations that I've had is like almost the opposite, right? They're going to build the agent and then start evaluating it. This becomes really challenging, right? Because we don't really, we're not defining those success things up front. We're not encoding that logic. I've seen a lot of success with our customers kind of going the other way around, starting from an eval perspective and then building the agent that matches those particular requirements that they've encoded in those scores. But it also enables that iteration, right? It creates that feedback loop. It establishes the baseline that we can build from, that we understand, right? When we do go make that change, it actually got better or it got worse. We have an understanding of why. Another thing that I've heard from customers as well is that it helps bridge this gap with PM and engineering. Oftentimes, PMs are really, really good at sort of defining that success criteria or defining the success of the agent, what that looks like, becomes really easy to kind of give that information or insight to those engineers to go and create those different types of evals. Um, the last, or maybe the last one here, but another one that I kind of mentioned earlier is the evaluation strategy. Start simple and then go to complex. So in the agent sort of framework, did it accomplish its goal, right? Looking at this input that it had, that we got, and the output that we received, is that match the scores that we've kind of created for it? Does that match the expectations that we set out for this particular agent? This is where, like, again, if you start from that simple perspective, it allows you to iterate and then kind of go down in a more granular fashion. So then we can go like actually step by step. Did we call the right tool? Did the tool get called with the right arguments? Can we create scores now to understand, did X tool get called before Y tool? We put that in our prompt. Did it actually show up in the steps that were created via the agent? And then from there, maybe getting a little bit more granular, the output from that tool, right? Did we use that? Did the agent use the output from that tool in the proper way? So you can start to think of like different ways in which you can get more complex from an eval perspective and create scores to assess these different things. But again, starting from that more simple place allows you to create the feedback loop. It allows you to establish that baseline that you can build from. And then finally, obviously mentioned this a couple different times, that feedback loop, right? Braintrust is going to be the place where you can create that or have that eval infrastructure that allows you to create really great AI products, right? So again, if you start from that place of evals, defining your scoring functions, creating, allowing a subject matter expert to create maybe a golden data set, and then creating that task that you can run against that, understanding then like logging this in a real-time sense to get user feedback. Now this can be used in actual offline data sets, and you can start to create this feedback loop. Without this, you're more in prototype land than you are in real production setting with reliability and accuracy. Um, so with that, let's actually jump into a demo of Loop. So I mentioned earlier, like some of the things that Loop will be able to do. So I want to show you how Loop can optimize tasks, how it can generate data sets, how it can develop scores or edit existing ones, and then the sort of evaluation and iteration workflow using an AI assistant within Braintrust. Okay, so in case you haven't seen the platform before, excuse me, this is the overview page of a project. You can think of a project as sort of like a collection of data sets, tasks, scores for a particular product, right? So imagine you're a company and you have many different AI products. You probably separate them out into individual projects here within Braintrust to sort of like store the collection of those assets. We're going to jump into a playground. A playground again is going to be a way for us to do evals in an iterative way. So I'll jump in here. You're presented initially with this sort of blank screen, and we're going to actually add the different components of the eval that I just walked through. So at the outset, I'll add in a prompt, right? So this is just going to be that task, right? It takes in an input and then produces an output. I'm going to pull in a data set, right? So think of this as my golden data set, my set of examples that a subject matter expert has curated for me and allows me to, again, establish that baseline that we can build from. And then finally, I want to add the different scores that, again, codify the logic of this application, the thing that like excuse me, the North Star essentially of whether or not this thing is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So the example that I'm working with here is sort of like a change log agent. We sort of are able to go out to GitHub, retrieve a series of commits, and then write a change log from those commits from the last time something was released. So imagine you're a developer and you're trying to understand, hey, what are the things that are coming in the next release? This is sort of the use case for that. So I have these three different scores that assess accuracy, completeness, and then formatting. If I look into each one of these, you'll see a couple different things. My accuracy score is again what we call an LLM as a judge. I can codify the logic to actually assess what accuracy means in the context of this particular task, right? I can also do this from a completeness perspective. So what does completeness mean for this particular task? So the LLM will produce sort of a value, excellent, good, fair, or poor, and then I will map that to a value between 0 and 1 down below. The last one, just to highlight here to give you a sense again for the breadth of things that you can do within Braintrust, is this is a code-based score. So this allows me to like be a little bit more deterministic. I'm not using an LLM, but I'm sort of understanding the output from a formatting perspective. Is it following the particular things that I set out from a section? So like I'm saying each section should start like this. These should be in the correct order. All these different things. I can assess that from a code-based perspective. So now that I have all of these different things, I can click run. Now I run sort of an eval within the playground, and you'd start to see the output from that task. And then once we get that output, we can start scoring with those different scores that we've configured. Just wanted to start here, and then we will start to layer in loop, but wanted to give you a sense for like how we start to get started with an eval and the different components that we can layer into this from a playground perspective. So we'll get some initial results here, but up here at the top, you'll see loop. Loop is you can think of as a, I don't know, cursor for evals. Very similar type of interface. You chat with this chat interface here. There's some easy buttons to get started to either optimize prompts or generate dataset rows. But you can ask anything you want here in the context of this particular eval. So I might say something like, "Can you help optimize this prompt?" And maybe before I hit enter, I'll come over to this summary layout to get a sense for like, what does this look like right now? Using the task that I have, the scores that I have against the data set, the set of test cases that I've defined here. So pretty good on accuracy, pretty good on completeness, but formatting, not very good at all. We got 0%. So obviously need to do some tweaking from a task perspective. And what I could do as a user, I would normally like maybe come in here, I would kind of parse through these different things. Maybe if I'm trying to assess the accuracy, I could understand like the rationale behind the score here, like why the LLM as a judge gave excellent in this case or poor in another, but it allows me to understand the different things that are happening. But I could also use loop here to do a lot of those same things to help optimize this prompt. So I'll do this. One thing to note here is that Loop has access to all of these different tools. And if I open this up, you'll see that it has the ability to edit prompts, right? Like that I mentioned. It has access to the playground that we're working with. It has access to the eval results that we just saw here. So in a manual sense, where a user would kind of go through and click and try to find the different things that the scorers are finding wrong with the particular task, Loop can go and do that for us now. It has access to that rationale and can use that as context to go and optimize the prompt. So you'll see here, we can now optimize this prompt. I'll click accept, and then it'll go through and start to run a net new eval given the prompt that we've just changed it to. So obviously this will take a second or two to get our eval results back, but I think just from a efficiency perspective or excuse me, a workflow perspective, this becomes a really great way to run evals, right? You have sort of like this assistant that has access to all of this context that you as a user would need to do very much the same thing, but it does it in an automated sense. So we'll get those evals and we can again jump back over to our summary to see the different things that are going on. It looks like we've gotten slightly better on accuracy and completeness, but maybe we haven't done enough on the formatting side. And now maybe Loop will be able to understand that and modify our prompt to fit that particular score. So once this eval completes, we'll get back the full results here. Again, you can still, even if you're using Loop in this sense, you can still kind of drill down through all of these different things. You still have a sense for the things that improved or regressed. So you get initial results back here from Loop saying, hey, we got an initial improvement, but the formatting score is still 0. Let's let's take a look at what that's supposed to look like. And maybe it now has access to the underlying scorer's logic themselves and can go and optimize that prompt to fit that use case. So you can see here, maybe just to open up my formatting score, it's supposed to look a little bit like this. These are my sections that I'm building toward. And you can see here, Loop now pulling in those scores as a tool is now able to do that. So again, accept my changes. We'll go through that same workflow, run that net new eval, and you should get back some actual results better on the formatting side. But again, I think like the thing that I'll come back to is the efficiency that we create here for users of Braintrust, augmenting their workflow with an AI assistant to do a lot of the same things that they would do, right? So like they'd probably open up that same score. They would look through the output to understand, hey, I'm missing it on this. Or the LLM as a judge gave back this rationale that doesn't really uh, fit the use case that I'm thinking through or thinking about the context, right? We give that to Loop and it has access to it, can do very much the same kind of stuff. Um, so while that's running, I think maybe the other thing to think through here, or what I tend to think through is like, okay, I may have like done better on my scores here, right? Formatting got better, or it should get better. Completeness, accuracy got better. But what if I'm thinking about what if I have data set, or excuse me, what if I have test cases that I'm not yet thinking about? Edge cases that I haven't yet put within my data set that if I did put in there, these scores would actually drop significantly. So I can also prompt Loop to create data set rows. So I could say something like, can you look at my data set and the previous evals to understand where I may have edge cases I'm not accounting for. Actually, might need to stop this while it's retrieving the eval results. All right. So again, trying to understand whether or not there are edge cases that the AI assistant can evaluate, looking at the data set and the evals that we already have, and then actually going and creating those rows. I think the one thing to look at here is the actual data set that I'm using, right? So it understands the structure of the data set. So again, thinking about the use case that I'm building for, it's a series of commits. It's a date, the last time this repository had a release, and then the URL itself. So it understands sort of like the structure of the data and can go build the data set to match that, right? And then also understand maybe where edge cases um, exist or don't, excuse me, where we're not accounting for edge cases within that data set. One of the things I think just to call out while this is running is what we're thinking about from a roadmap perspective. If you look over here at the logs, I think I mentioned feedback loop several times here, actually logging real time, getting feedback from a logging perspective from your application, and then writing that back to the data set. Now imagine if Loop has access to those same logs and it's able to now assess the logs, again, from a scoring perspective. Hey, these are the things that we saw. Scores were actually pretty low here. These represent maybe edge cases, and let's pull these into an offline sense. Again, sort of like creating efficiency in that feedback loop and building a better AI product. So should have a series of hopefully recommendations from Loop to go and create net new data set rows here shortly. Um, but while that's going, maybe another sort of call out is the eval playground here is also something that allows for you to snapshot these results in time. And so imagine you want to understand over time how this particular eval is performing. People hook this up to like a GitHub action, or of course you can do this locally. But as you start to change that, you want to be able to kind of create an understanding of improvement or regression across those different scores over a series of weeks, months, whatever it is. And the experiment here is actually a good way to do that. I don't have a view here in this one, but I could show you maybe in a different sort of view. So this becomes, maybe I'll look at this in a slightly different way. So over time, what does that score look like for that particular experiment? Then this also becomes, I think, a really great way to do that model leaderboard, right? So imagine that net new model does get released. what is the like how does it compare against the other ones that we can run it for? This also becomes a great way to understand duration, latency, cost. All of these things are incredibly important as we make the decision to go and deploy that agent. So if we have that the infrastructure is set up to go and actually evaluate those models, becomes really, really easy to go and do that. Let's come back over here to our playground. So it looks like we have some, of course, some demo goblins, but of course it would happen here. But you can imagine now what would normally happen is we would generate sort of like the data set rows that would map to edge cases that loop has found, and we can add those back to the data set. The other thing to mention here is that maybe I'll open up the tools here, is that loop can create net new code base scores. Eventually, it'll be able to create the LLM as a judge type scores, but these are the ones that are again are going to be a little bit more heuristic. And given the context that it has about the playground, the data set that it has access to, the edge cases that it finds, creating a code base score that maps to maybe something that we're not yet evaluating for also becomes incredibly beneficial to this process. Um, let me, I'll create a net new chat here and maybe we'll ask a different uh, type of question. Actually, I really do want to show you the data set scorer here. And so let's see if we can run this one more time. Maybe just to give you a sense for like what's happening under the hood here, to give you you can kind of drill into these different things. So being able to kind of summarize that playground is generally the first step for this agent to get a sense for what's actually happening. What is the prompts or what is the prompt or the prompts that we're using? What are the data sets? And then of course like have we run this yet thus far? And then it'll retrieve the eval results if they already exist, and if they do, it'll kind of move on from that point. Maybe this isn't a good question to ask. Maybe we could ask something about our formatting score, right? That didn't necessarily cover anything. So copied some of these questions earlier because they worked, and now we're sort of walking through these different things. Um, So again, we'll summarize the playground. We will retrieve the eval results that exist here, and then it should move forward with the different tools that it has access to. One thing to call out here, I mentioned that we deployed this once Claude 4 Sonnet was released because it showed really great eval results. What you'll see down here are the models that you've configured within your account. It'll default to this if you've configured an Anthropic model or an Anthropic provider. But these will be used. These are really our recommendations, what you should use. But if you have other providers configured, you can use them. They just probably won't be as good as the Claude 4 models. All right, well, let's try this one more time. This may also just be because I was running through this previous to the webinar. It could just be I'm using my own sort of Anthropic API key, so this could be sort of a rate limit that I'm running into. Okay, well, I think we're after a few of these, we're probably stuck on this step here for whatever reason. Um, again, important to highlight here the functionality that this has unlocked. We've had a lot of really great feedback from our users using this thus far. It is in a beta, and maybe just to kind of highlight, we do have some documentation out on our docs site that gives you a sense for, again, all the different tools that it has access to, what's coming soon, the different sort of behavior that you can expect. You can also select sort of a continuous agent mode. So actually allowing it to accept those changes for you. So a little bit more of a YOLO mode on the loop side. But you can imagine this sort of augmenting your workflow from the playground and creating a lot of efficiency for the developers and users of the Braintrust platform. Um, no, that wasn't the best demo. Hopefully, you're able to kind of understand like the functionality that this does offer and allow you to create and maybe just to kind of get some key takeaways from the presentation and the webinar. Evaluation is foundational, right? The scores as quantifiable PRDs, starting simple and then going complex. Uh, these become sort of like the foundational points of actually building really good agents. It's not the other way around. Like the evals, like from what we've seen, again, both internally as well as the customers that we work with, this is how they think about building really reliable AI products. The test-driven approach, I think, kind of builds on that. I've heard another sort of saying of like test-driven development. It's sort of a corollary to that, and I think you can think of it like that as well. You're sort of building out those scores, those tests, and ensures that it meets those things that you've set out for it. But again, it's really again starting from that foundational perspective of evals. The systematic methodology, this is, again, starting from a very simple place and then building complexity on top of that. I think, again, one of the things that I've heard in my time here at Braintrust is this sort of like paralysis of getting started, of like where to actually start evaluating this thing because it can be somewhat complex. But starting from that, like, hey, this is the input, this is the output. Does it sort of conform to like this first thing? Let's go ship that or give it to a small set of users, actually get some real interactions with that application. But this then provides you a really good understanding of the failure points of the application and then allows you to build things that are much more complex that actually do create that reliability. But starting from that simple place is the thing that again creates that feedback loop. And that kind of leads me maybe to another thing is the feedback loop that Braintrust creates for you within the platform. The eval infrastructure becomes paramount to creating really reliable AI products. Again, you can build something, you can put something out there. Prototype, it could be a prototype, it could be something that you've iterated on a little bit further. Maybe you have your own sort of like homegrown solution for evals, but what you don't have is the infrastructure to continually iterate, to understand how people are interacting with that application in a production setting, how to go add those edge cases back to your offline data set, how to bring humans or subject matter experts into the fold as well so that they can go and review and add those things back to data sets. That's really the foundational part, I think, of building really great AI products is having that infrastructure around your evals so you can have the confidence to go and ship that thing into production. That's all I have today. More than happy to go into a Q&A with you all. Let me actually open, where's my Q&A? Okay, cool. So I have a question from Jackie. Appreciate the question, Jackie. Where can I collect annotations to build my golden data set and use that to measure my evaluator effectiveness? So within the Braintrust platform, you have the ability, let me jump back over here and jump into a different view. You have the ability to go and create human review sort of scores. And so imagine you have like, I'll actually open this up here. You have the ability to create different types of review options for maybe those subject matter experts, the people that need to go in and actually assess whether or not it's conforming to the LLM as a judge is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, something along those lines. You can create sort of this categorical score. You can create a continuous score, or you can allow for more free-form input for your reviewers. And this will then show up within the logs. So now imagine you have this view of actual application data, and you're able to view this in several different ways. So I can open this up. Maybe I'm more interested in this sort of like thread view. This is maybe a little bit more like question and answer, or it follows a little bit more of like that chat type interface. But this is where a user can come in and start to add those scores. So I can enter what we call human review mode. And all of those scores that I've configured for humans are going to be over here to the left, and they can configure those. These can then be used to filter our logs down and then actually add these back to data sets. So imagine we have humans going in, adding tags, adding scores. We are now able to filter these logs down and then add these back to a data set. But this is then going to inform my offline evals and create really effective evals, right, in an offline sense. Let's see here. Hopefully that answers your question, Jackie. From Matt, recommendations on evaluating the quality of generated data. Can we use scores for this, and can you build that into Loop? This is actually what we have sort of like a weekly stand up on Monday, and one of the things that we do there is we talk a little bit about the things that we're working on or we're shipping. And one thing that I saw here in that last meeting is actually pulling scores into the playground. So right now, the things that you pull in here are going to be prompts, agents, or something that we call a remote eval. If there's a question, I might get into that. But this will also allow for scores as well. So imagine now like you're able to add sort of a data set for a score to ensure that it's like actually following the thing that like it's doing the thing that it's supposed to be doing, and having a data set specifically for that score. So this is definitely something that we are thinking about internally to help our users go and do. But I've often referred to it as like evaling your evals. There are certainly ways I think to do it right now, but we're working on making that a lot easier for our users in the short term. Um, cool. Sorry, I'm gonna grab some water. Let's see. Um, from CTSO, OpenAI's Playground also has the ability to run evaluations and optimize prompts. I'm wondering how Braintrust thinks about Loop's core advantages over using OpenAI's Playground, assuming one wants to use the OpenAI models to begin with. I think you kind of nailed one of them. It's the flexibility here. Uh, Ankur, our CEO, just recently released a blog post about Braintrust not being an eval framework, but being eval infrastructure. You can bring whatever framework you want. You can use whatever models you want. I think that's really going to be one of the foundational things is bringing allowing you to not necessarily be locked into a particular vendor from a model perspective. The other thing that I would call out is really like how Braintrust is built itself and the infrastructure that we create. So I've talked a lot about infrastructure and the feedback loop, right? We have the ability here to create logs, but the back end of Braintrust is actually something that we built because of the all of the challenges that we saw other players in the space having. So we built a purpose-built database for actually the data that's being generated from all of these large language model applications. The shape of this data is not like anything that we've seen before, right? The size of it is massive. The shape of it is different. Throwing sort of traditional databases like ClickHouse or something like that, you tend to see things fall down very, very quickly at scale. And if you go to our page, and I won't go there, but like you look at the customers that we have just an incredibly massive scale from an ingest perspective, and we need to be able to provide a really good experience for our users to create that feedback loop. So I guess my answer is not necessarily like playground related. It's more about that infrastructure that we create here within Braintrust that enables you to go build really good AI products. I think you can certainly use the OpenAI playground. It'll do some of the things that I think you're able to do here within hours, but it's the infrastructure that around it that I think is probably missing. Let's see here. Does Loop have any approach to, it was a rate limit, so we're able to get that back. Does Loop have any approach to optimize a prompt? It does. This is, I think, the first thing that you were able to see, Ankur. I don't know if you're asking for like the underlying sort of mechanism to go and do that, but I think it's a combination of things. It's the tools that it has access to go and optimize that prompt. So you'll note that if I don't have sort of an eval run within my playground, it'd actually go and trigger one because the context of that eval becomes really important to go and optimize that particular task. Um, Understanding what those scores were, understanding the rationale that you get from an LLM as a judge score as context helps you go and optimize that prompt. So I guess what I would point to, and I hope this answers your question, is the tools that we have access to go and actually optimize that prompt or create new scores or the different things that you're able to do. Uh, Ravaraja, I probably said that wrong. I apologize. I have some ground truth data set, but there are mistakes in it. I keep correcting them. Can Loop help in understanding the changes and then apply that to all samples? Um, I guess I'd like to understand, and I don't know if you're able to come off mute or if that's possible, but like the mistakes that are in it, like why I guess the data set keeps reverting back to, and maybe that's not exactly it, but it reverts back to the mistakes that you had in it. Um, One of the things that I think maybe speaking a little bit more from a roadmap perspective, because you don't see this as a tool yet, is the logs that that we'll have access to. Oh, Raja, again, sorry if I butchered that, but feel free to come off mute and clarify.
Yeah, hi. So the scenario is that in grounded data set, sometimes the expectation changes, behavior changes. Okay, we wanted to modify our requirement to capture agent data as well sometimes. Or let's say in a conversation, we wanted to understand what agent is saying, but rather than we modify that later on, okay, let's understand what bot is also saying. So now we have to modify the data set or there are some mistakes happening. Annotators might have done some mistakes in annotating the samples and all. So let's say we identify some pattern there and correct keep on correcting, but there are so many samples. Can Loop help in automating that?
I would say at a high level, yes, because of, excuse me, the context that it has access to. I do think where this becomes beneficial is when we're able to kind of bring in actual real-time logs for this. You're also able to like imagine you're bringing in those logs. They have their own scores. They have tags, like things like that. Being able to like maybe filter down the data set to a particular thing. And so maybe like you're adding to this data set and certain things become stale. Maybe you want that there for historical reasons, but maybe you can for net new evals you want to filter it down to maybe things that were updated in the last week, whatever it is, or that have a certain tag. But I do think the ability to like actually pull in real-time data becomes beneficial here.
Uh, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate the question. Jackie, this is great to build an evaluator to start. What is your suggestion to keep iterating and improving the eval if it becomes stale? Um, This, so I do think a lot of this is, and I apologize for like keeping, like continuing to come back here, but this is where the infrastructure becomes really powerful in being able to understand whether or not your eval is becoming stale. Being able to like understand, and so maybe one of the things that I didn't highlight here, and if I go over into the logs, and I look at actually really quick, I'll go over to this. So what we've been talking about primarily is offline evals and running these before we get into production. What we're also able to do is take those scores and run them in an online sense. So as those real-time logs come into Braintrust, actually use those same scores, those PRDs, to understand is that application performing as we expect it to do, as we expect it to? Is it uncovering any edge cases? But this actually can help inform us whether or not our evaluations are becoming stale. Because now we can understand, let's say in an offline sense, X score is at 80%, but online scoring of that when we're sampling it at 50% or whatever it is, drops down to 50%. this becomes a really great indicator that there is something wrong in our data set that we're not accounting for in an offline sense. And this is the way that we create that feedback loop. Jackie, feel free to come off mute if that doesn't help answer the question. But I do think it's around creating understanding real-time interaction of that to understand where your evals may be becoming stale.
Yeah, I guess I had a follow up on there. The online evals are definitely helpful and make sense. How do I find out about like that drop? Like you said, 80 to 50%. Like
Yeah.
can I build logic on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have this feature called automations, and so you can create this. It runs at a particular interval of your choice, and essentially what happens here, like let's say you have a score, right? So I have like a factuality score. And I want to say anytime it drops below zero point 0.5, so any logs where my score factuality drops below zero point 0.5 in the last hour, I want to go send something to this webhook, right? So this is your URL.com. But now we can kind of create, like imagine this webhook is able to now go create like a Slack message or a PagerDuty alert or any of the other systems that you're kind of using at your company. Now you're able to hook that into the actual things that we're scoring from an online perspective. Yeah, so I'd point you to automations here within Braintrust to go and do that.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Appreciate you coming on. Let's see here. Jack, it looks like we got you again. How do most folks send in data sets? What is your suggestion or target for a good data set size to be statistically significant? Excuse me. This is like, I think going back to thinking back to the slides, this is a little bit on like this simple to complex. People get caught up in like how many things do I need? Do I need 100? Do I need 1,000? Like what is the thing? If I showed you our loop evals, I think we have four different data sets that have 15 to 30 rows, if I'm remembering correctly. Like you don't need a lot to get going. The important piece that I said earlier is establishing that baseline because then we can actually understand is the score is it actually assessing what we want it to assess, but it creates the place in which we could actually iterate from. And so I don't know if there's like a magic number here. I do think like bringing in subject matter experts to go and create that is an incredibly important piece as well. Braintrust is a great place to go and do that. You can, if you think about data sets here from a Braintrust perspective, you can add these either via CSV, you can drop in a JSON file, or you can either insert data programmatically. So it becomes easy to go and do that. But then it also, if you have a subject matter expert going in and being able to do this as well, also helpful. But I think maybe to your question, you don't need to start with a lot. I've seen data sets that have 10, 20, 30 rows. But this is again, like we can create those offline evals. This creates or starts that feedback loop that we can then build from. Now we have a few set of users using it in a production or even a staging setting. Now we can get sort of that real-time feedback, add those edge cases back to the data set. But this is really going to strengthen our evals. I wouldn't get too caught up in, hey, it has to be X number of rows for it to actually be significant. Because the feedback loop to me, in my opinion, is the significant piece. When is Loop MCP coming? Good question, Ben. No timelines that I can share at the moment. Have heard this a couple times. I know MCP is certainly like a hot topic out there. Just nothing here at the moment. Really quick, I'll answer, is Loop supported in the SDK? Not right now. It's a good question though. Let's see, Nick, what patterns do you see as most effective when evaluating multi-turn trajectories? When we want to measure the impact of a prompt change, often the most important impact to measure is how it affects the agent's ability to perform a sequence of tasks. Um, Let me actually link you out to this blog post. There's a lot of really great content here around like the different types of agents you might be building, and then maybe the different types of scores or like the different types of evals that you might want to run for those types of use cases. So like the augmented LLM all the way down to like the fully autonomous agent, right? So I think there's some really good stuff in here that will help give you a sense for the different things that you can start to think about or start evaluating in the multi-turn kind of aspect. I do think, like, again, sorry to like maybe give you the boring answer, is that the starting point, I think, in my opinion, is like the input and the output. Um, is the output, like, is that actually a good thing given the series of questions that the user asked? A good place to start. Sorry, I'm going through these a little bit quick. To add some color to above, I think the idea of loop is great. However, I would strongly prefer to use it from cloud. Okay, so Ben, I think this is from the SDK. I think this would be one thing to point out. Like, we do have an MCP server that you can kind of load into your IDE of choice. I think this would be incredibly cool to have as tools that you have access to. I can't speak to the roadmap or like the timeline of something like that. There is nothing that I've heard at the moment that we can start to add that. But if you did want to like at least get started with using Braintrust locally from your editor or your terminal, you could certainly do that using, and it pulls in like the experiments that you have or the data sets. So feel free to start to experiment with that, but can certainly pass the feedback along to the team. Cool. That is it. Really appreciate the questions, everybody. Appreciate you hanging on for as long as you did. Take a look at some of the Loop docs. If you're not signed up for Braintrust, please do. We have a free account out there. It becomes really easy to get going, and then you can actually experience Loop firsthand for yourselves. But again, appreciate the time and you all kind of spending time with me for the last hour. Thanks all.